Welcome to the Nerd Journey Podcast. Our goal is to help you, the technology professional, accelerate your career progression, increase your job satisfaction, and be more effective in your existing role.
We want to bring listeners like you the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers.
I'm John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, sharing co-host duties with Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_.
We're two former IT operations guys who have moved on to pre-sales roles with technology vendors. We have our opinions, but we also like to highlight the journeys of others and see what we can learn from them.
We'd also like to ask for your feedback to make this a conversation, not a one-way broadcast. Email us at nerdjourneypodcast@gmail.com or DM us at nerdjourney on Twitter. So come join us on our nerd journey.
Let's take a trip. Episode 316. When you have an emergency, what's the disaster recovery plan for your career? David Klee is a returning guest, and he would tell you that you need to make sure you've done the prep work. And I'll give you a hint. It goes back to having good documentation. David is an experienced consultant, and he's the founder of Heraflux Technologies. If you missed part 1 of our discussion with David in episode 315, we talked about how good documentation of technology systems can make us better troubleshooters and helps us develop better disaster recovery plans for businesses. We also talked a little bit about how the business may or may not see the value in having that documentation. This week in part 2 of our discussion, we're going to explore what it means to build and test a career DR plan. I said it goes back to documentation, but in order to build this, you need to keep your eyes open by looking in the mirror and out the window. David gives us some great examples of questions we can ask ourselves to help us document our technical accomplishments and some business accomplishments that came with those technical accomplishments. We talk about how to translate these things so that you can put them on a resume and how you can look for opportunities to build expertise in some perhaps unexpected areas and circumstances. One of the things I love most about co-hosting a podcast is that we don't plan every single thing we ask in the interview and everything we're going to discuss. We have a rough structure and we let it flow. And what was really interesting about this episode is that the format naturally turned itself into an exploration of different topical areas under the umbrella of career DR. But when we explore an abstract concept or recommendation, David was able to immediately follow it with concrete examples from his own experience, whether it be early career or during his time as a business owner and consultant. I really like the way that took shape, and I hope you'll enjoy it as well. Here we go with part 2 of our discussion with David Klee. We all have the intention of making sure we keep our resume up to date or our disaster recovery plan for our career or our lives, and we don't do a good job of that.
The tech side is arguably the easy part. DR for the career, especially in this day and age, if you get cut today because some bean counter just with a spreadsheet, oh, you make too much, you're gone. What are you going to do? What's the next step? Are you ready to take an unplanned detour in life? Who do you know? What do you know? What have you done that you can talk about or reference to help you get the next leg up? What have you done that's so proprietary that you can't mention a speck of it? Or it's so proprietary that it doesn't transfer out of that job. My first job in college, I was working for a market research firm. There was an in-house developed platform that had its own proprietary scripting language, and you could build web applications in it, or you could build surveys with it. Well, I was the intermediary between the team that built the platform and the team that used the team. One, they had never talked. So the people that used it were doing all kinds of stuff that the people that built it had no clue. When you sit back and you look at that, you spent 3 years there. What did I learn? I learned how to script in a language that does not leave that company borders. That's not a good career builder unless you intend to stay with that company for your entire career. And this is the 2020s. Good luck with that.
definitely one of the things you want to ask, like going into that, because really they're asking you to become a captive of that group.
But you don't know it.
That's true.
In most cases, you'll never know it until you're neck deep in it. It takes keeping your eyes open, no matter how much you enjoy your job, to figure out, is the captivity of this job worth it? Is there job security? Do I enjoy what I'm doing? Am I growing, or am I just moving laterally? What's worth it? And in that particular job, go back full circle, they found out I was a good troubleshooter. So I was cornered into fixing bugs in existing software built on that platform. And in a lot of cases, I would say it would be faster to rebuild this with a new version of the existing platform than it is to try to patch the bugs in the old version. I think I mentioned this on the last one, but they would not let me rebuild. They would just make me patch. It's come full circle with this stuff because it all comes together.
I want to know more about keeping your eyes open. Every one of us works a job somewhere, but to keep your eyes open, what does that mean in a little bit more detail, and what does that look like practically?
That's a great question. That's a hard answer. Keeping your eyes open involves looking at yourself in a mirror, I think. Let's say you enjoy doing XYZ. Look at yourself. What do you want to do? What do you enjoy doing? What do you like about the current job? What don't you like about the current job? From my perspective, long time ago, I got out of college, had a couple jobs that were okay, but it was always, how do I break out of just being an IT grunt, and how do I get into a position where I can become a business driver rather than a cost sink in IT operations? I always ask myself that question. My wife, when I went back and forth with this for years, look at your value to the business. Am I there just keeping the lights on? And what about that do you enjoy? And then look out the window. This is what I did 20 years ago now. What am I doing? And how much am I getting paid for this? And how much am I appreciated by the business? What am I doing that is transferable to another business of any size, big, small, whatever? And how much of that enjoyment or satisfaction out of that job am I going to retain? You don't have a lot of those answers when you're just starting out, but that's where you start talking to people. Find people in that area of any specialty, be it IT or whatever, that you enjoy. And there's probably a community around it. I got lucky. I found the SQL Server community in 2008. And that was because a guy that I got to know really well after that started a SQL Server user group chapter in Omaha, Nebraska, of all places. And I got lucky. I found out about it and was there for the very first one. I got to know the community around it. And I got to embrace a lot of the stuff that it's like, I'm a dork for really liking this stuff, but here's a room with 50 other people that enjoy the same exact thing. This is cool. And I can talk about it with them. And I'm not getting made fun of. They're agreeing with me. They like this stuff. It's like, okay, well, where do you work? What do you do every day? What don't you like about your job? What do you like? What do you wish you could do more of? Well, this is the same kind of stuff I'm seeing here, except you're getting paid twice as much. Interesting. So there's less that I don't like in that role. There's more of the stuff that I like, and your company gives you more time to focus on the stuff that you like to do. Okay, let's talk. Who do you know? And do you have an opening in your company? Do you have people you know that do similar things and they're looking? Or I'm not there yet qualification-wise to be able to get that job. But hey, you do this stuff day in and day out. What can I do to learn more? What can I do to push myself? If the company that I'm at is just focused on keeping the lights on, what can I do on the side to grow? And it's that want to grow and do more that not everybody has. And again, I'm not faulting anybody for either direction. Me, I'm a lifelong learner. I want to know as much about everything as I possibly can, but it's how can I learn everything that I need to know to go beyond an IT operations lightkeeper kind of role? What can I do to help the company see the value in IT to invest further in it?
It's so interesting because you talked about a couple different things there. One was the difference between being a cost center and being like a business driver, right? And on a very low level, like if you're not in leadership, sometimes it's just what you're working on. Are you working on systems for the company, or are you working on systems for the product?
Or if the systems that you're keeping up and running for the company Can you say, I kept this system on? That saved or that made X amount of money per day by keeping it up and running. At the Performing Arts Center I was at a while back, I watched what happened with the volunteer managers. How do you track the volunteers for a performing arts show? Well, they gave them Excel for 350 shows and 1,300 volunteers. I saw a need, and quite honestly, I wanted to learn how to program in .NET. So I gave myself an impossible deadline, an impossible task, and I said, I will build a volunteer management system for this Performing Arts Center. I had 4 months until the next season opened. I knew nothing about .NET. Go. Oh, and I was still working 80 hours a week at the Performing Arts Center because the show must go on, right? So 4 months later, I built the volunteer management system. It integrated with the ticketing system. The house managers could hit a button, open a show directly from the ticketing system. It pre-filled and populated everything. They had templates for all the positions that they needed. Hit the button. It opened it up. The first week it went live, it saved 55 staff hours between 2 people. That was cool.
There's your resume bullet at the end there.
That's the resume builder right there. And that actually enabled me to get my next job.
That's it exactly. It's like you need to be able to quantify those things in a way that the next person who's thinking about hiring you can understand, right? My value to the organization was that I was able to save 55 staff hours per performance.
Yeah.
Times the number of performances, right? That translates to dollars.
Yeah, it literally allowed 2 people that were working 80 hours a week to go down to a 50-hour-a-week position. It was fun. And yeah, that's the resume builder, because not only did you learn a tech skill and it expanded what you know to make you more marketable to another company, but it showed that you can think about the business, not just a tech feature.
Well, and there's an interesting irony here, because when we were talking about before, a lot of companies don't have enough documentation to accurately troubleshoot a system when there's a problem. But when you are applying for a job, you need some kind of documentation of your experience with a system that indicates your expertise level in order to be deemed competent enough to go and then work on this system that possibly that company has not documented well. But if you don't document your own experience well, you have a problem.
You have a serious problem, because how do you prove to another company that, yeah, I actually do know how to do this stuff, and this is what I've done? You don't. The only thing the other company can do is grill you technically, and if you're good, you can fake your way through it, but you need the proof. You need the proof to make the hiring manager at that other company really comfortable in wanting to go to the next step.
You commented earlier about companies that want people to do and not document. It's funny because probably around performance review time at those companies, they then turn around and say, well, we need you to document like all the impact that you've had, on the business over the past, year or whatever period it is that they're talking about. And then all of a sudden documentation becomes critically important then.
Yep.
But, that's at odds with the culture, right? If the culture is, yes, we document as we go because we need these processes to be repeatable and well understood. And we need to understand how they change over time. That's one of the things that we need to understand. That's important.
And the documentation onus is on you. They'll never give you the time to document your successes because they don't want you to jump ship and bring that list of successes with you. So it's on you. How much time do you have nights and weekends to keep up on this stuff? You have to make the time.
How detailed should that list of successes for yourself in whatever you're doing be?
Detailed enough to make it repeatable. Again, you can't take anything proprietary from a company, but the knowledge of building a volunteer management system has stuck with me. And I've actually been building web apps on the side for certain tasks and things, including something we're working on right now. I've been doing it ever since. And, the framework has changed, the foundation has changed, but the knowledge of how to take a business challenge, justify and quantify the impact of solving it technically, implementing it, and then measuring the outcome. If you can document that, that's what you need for the proof. Because nobody's going to ask you, how did you render this page in a .NET 8 Blazor application? They're not going to do that. But they're going to say, what did you do and why did you do it? Give me 3 sentences on how you did it and tell me the outcome.
I think getting that refined outcome statement for your resume or something that you could speak to in an interview. My personal feeling is it takes writing down a description of what you've done a couple of different times, in my mind, as much detail as you have. Like, I'm just going to brain dump. Then I'm going to go and refine that a couple of times. And then I'm going to try and pull out that nugget of, here's the impact. Here's the way to say this for this job and to make it the most meaningful in this particular role from a relevancy perspective.
You have to do it. You have to make the time to do it because you stand out. I've got a kid I call him a kid. He's probably 25, out of the Denver area that I'm mentoring. Great guy. What have you done that tells me you know how to do this? Like, well, I built a web application to help my fiance at the time track all the finances for the house. Cool. What'd you do on the back end? PHP front end, SQL Server back end, web application in his test lab. Cool. Why? Isn't QuickBooks easier? Yeah, but he wanted the experience of actually building it. Great. How much time did it take you? He's like, oh, longer than it should, but I wanted to know why all this stuff worked. You are hired. Great guy. I have a lot of fun working with him. He'll tell me something like that, and I'm like, what if you did this? Oh, and the whole next weekend, he's just ignoring everybody working on something.
That's terrific.
The tech side of this is easy. Even just a lateral move in the business. How do you justify that you're going to be able to actually solidify a business need to fill a role? You know, if it's a promotion, how do you justify that? You have to keep track of those. I mean, over here with our consulting, saved an airline $31 million in database licensing, added $500 million worth of company valuation to an electric vehicle startup, worked with 4 of the 10 largest hedge funds in the world. You have fun with this stuff. And to go back to your point about documenting this, I have multiple sets of documents. One is the business accomplishments. The other is the technical accomplishments. Totally 2 different things. You can put them together and give the justification on it, but I'd literally spend about a Saturday morning a month just making notes on this stuff. I mean, the last one, migrated 141 terabyte SQL Server database halfway across the country, and our migration took 18 seconds. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's fun. Now, there's 4 months of work that went into that 18 seconds. And to be able to just rattle that off and say, hey, we did that. We can do it again. You know, not only do we have a good outcome with it, but we documented the process. It's a repeatable process. And quite literally, anybody at that company could follow that process and not call me again to do that. And I'm happy for that. Go through it once. You don't need me a second time if I've done my job right. Most consultants don't work like that, but I do. I have fun with it. Call me back for something new. Don't call me back for something I've already done for you and trained you on how to do it.
No, I mean, in that case, your value to your consultancy is that you can go and build that for a different company, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have the recipe. Do you need somebody with that recipe? Because I've already built it, and then and it's battle tested.
It's battle tested and got the gray hair to prove it. Yeah, that's part of the fun with this stuff. Now I take that recipe, and instead of you asking me to make vegetable beef soup, now I need to make chili. Okay. Can I adapt my recipe to it quickly? You want to hear the worst and arguably the most success we've had on a troubleshooting gig?
I do.
We had an ISV that we had to do some work with a couple of years ago. Try this scenario. We have to migrate this SQL Server. Are you interested? Yeah, no problem. Sign here. Sign, sign, sign. Okay, now we'll tell you the reality of what you're doing. We have 2 weeks to migrate this. The hardware that this SQL Server is on disappears in 2 weeks. We have one maintenance window opportunity this coming Friday night. The system's been here for 8 years. Nobody at this company has even bothered to look at anything because it always worked. They don't know where the source code for the application is. They have no documentation on the database backend. And they tried it twice a year ago and nobody could figure it out.
That does not sound good.
That was not a fun week. So it was a week of discovery on a machine and a whole company I'd never worked with before. Got a real good look at how this thing was up and running. Stood up brand new servers off to the side, got everything copied over there, got everything we could possibly think of over there. We have a 4-hour maintenance window. 10 minutes into the migration window, the app owner said, we're getting app errors. Wouldn't connect. So 2 hours later, we figured out. The app was hard-coded for 3 different SQL Server non-standard defaults that nobody had bothered to check for or document at all. And the app had a connection string hard-coded inside it. So on the application servers, somebody had hacked the SQL Server driver and redirected the connections to this other machine. We got this running in 3 hours and 10 minutes into a 4-hour maintenance window. I didn't sleep for a day after that because I was so jacked from nerves, but it worked. And then the next morning, because I couldn't sleep, 5 a.m., I'm on a laptop on the couch documenting every single thing that I did and took all the screenshots that I'd been taking through the entire time, stitched them together and built them a how-to document. They didn't ask me to do it because they didn't care. All they know is that it worked, but they now have the how-to for how to do this again down the road. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That was a hard one. They're very appreciative when we were done, but we had one chance at it with a system that nobody knew. We know a lot more about that now. Tell me.
I mean, that sounds like Mission Impossible to me.
It turns out that they thought it was going to be an impossibility, and they wanted to drop it on somebody else so that nobody there had to take the blame for it not working. So when I say IT consultants are sometimes punching bags, yeah, it's real. Thankfully, people know me for database and infrastructure, but I also know coding, stuff like that. So we were able to dig into everything. But that was a nasty, nasty troubleshooting effort. And nobody there had bothered to look into why the system stayed up and running for those 8 years.
And in your documentation, did you document the technical outcome and the business outcome as part of your process?
Everything. And we did a post-mortem at the end of that for me to describe why they should have allowed these folks to invest the time to understand why ahead of time. And here's all the details so that you understand the why from this point forward. And I told them they needed to rebuild the application from scratch because they didn't have the source code anymore. But being able to document that now and say, we troubleshot some of the most mission impossible, insane things, and here is the outcome. We essentially kept a full, internationally known ISV. We kept their knowledge base up because literally they were going to have server backups and nowhere to restore them onto. No pressure at all.
That's crazy.
That was a good one.
I like what you just said there, though. The outcome of the troubleshooting session is actually what you documented. So the technical outcome and the business outcome that you generated from your brain dump of everything that you had done is evidence that you're a good troubleshooter.
The hilarious thing is, at the end of the day, for the business, nothing changed. That platform that they used thousands of times a second was still up and running. So literally, sometimes the business outcome is transparent. And to be able to tout that to the right people, they get it. But to the non-seasoned recruiter, they don't know. So you have to be able to spin that in a way that, you don't have to embellish anything, but you have to know what to bring to the surface to get them to actually understand the significance of what you're talking about.
I guess in my mind, I was thinking, is the right outcome for the business that nothing went wrong?
In some cases, yeah. That's how I got into virtualization. Virtualize application and database servers underneath a very large performing arts on sale. And if it doesn't crash, I have succeeded. That was the goal, and we succeeded. In other cases, we've done database migrations for really large companies out there. The goal is absolute minimum downtime and disruption of the business. Did you meet the very tight migration window that we had? If so, that's a success. Because the technical outcome is we're now on newer hardware. We've now gone through a database upgrade. We've gone through and we've patched, or we fixed technical problem XYZ and now it's stable again. Business doesn't care. Business cares about uptime.
I'm wondering in that specific case where the business is underinvested and has shown like an amazing lack of curiosity into what goes into like a critical business system. Like, at least in my mind, that means that they don't understand that it's a critical business system.
Bingo.
And they don't understand the value of the system's uptime. That means when you perform, then maybe nobody cares.
Correct.
That's so tough.
The nihilist in me says it would be good for the business to let things crash and burn every once in a while. I don't have it in me to do that. But other folks that I see at these companies don't have that level of moral standards. And in some cases, if the business will not allow them to do XYZ, they'll let it crash and burn so that they can be the hero and come back and say, I told you so.
I guess there's a balance there, right? Of, you're telling me what's important and what's not important and demonstrating that by budget and time and attention.
Yep.
And I can disagree with you as an organization. As an employee, it's difficult to take it upon yourself to say, well, I'm going to sacrifice my time and my maybe mental well-being and my health to go on this, hero's journey to fix the problem regardless of, what it is that you say for no recognition.
I'm with you to a point. But at the same time, if the hero's journey to fix something for no recognition means I've grown as a technologist with a transferable and portable set of skills that will elevate my next step, is it worth it? And in some cases, no, and in some cases, yeah. That volunteer management system I built at the Performing Arts Center, that was 600 hours of work in 4 months outside of an 80-hour-a-week job. That was a lot. But that skill showed that I can build tools to solve business problems. It gave me a more modern framework to implement that skill. And it gave me an industry standard means to demonstrate it. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment and a workaholic, so I come at this from a rather jaded perspective. But if your home situation and family situation allows you to do it for bursts, I claim it's worth it. You don't have to do it all day, every day for 25 years, but to do it in bursts, to hit a marker that you give to yourself. You're not running an ultra marathon by training for 20 minutes a week. There's work that comes along with it, and there is sacrifice in a lot of this stuff because the knowledge isn't just going to pop in your head, and work's not going to give you the time to learn this stuff. They're just not. Not unless you have a truly special organization. And if you do, don't think about leaving because that's awesome. But you got to push yourself. It pushes your career. It pushes your ability to prepare. You look at today, what if a company that you work for just goes belly up? What are you going to do tomorrow? And that has to be in your mind. And you need to know both from a business and a technologist perspective, if you're in this career, what do you do? What do you need to do to make that next step easier?
How would you decide what to do next if that did happen? Like, okay, I'm just trying to think through it, right? If a business I worked for went belly up, I would need to know where all my documented accomplishments are, if I even have them, and probably who to call to network with so that I can get some feelers out for a job, but probably also need to have a tight handle on my finances as well so that I know how long I have before I'm really in some trouble.
It's a hard one. And that goes back to the loop of personal troubleshooting and documentation. Let's say you do a job for 5 years. Your last day on the job, are you going to remember all the accomplishments that you had during that 5-year tenure? No. Are you going to remember that monthly? Sure. Take a Saturday morning, sit there with a good cup of coffee or something, and just write. Throw in a Word document, throw it in Dropbox or OneDrive or wherever, and just, it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be, a formal PowerPoint presentation on all this stuff. What did you enjoy? What wins did you have? What problems did you solve? What did you learn? What'd you do for the business? What did the business do for you? If the business did something cool for you and you liked it, maybe that's, a prereq for hiring at your next job. A couple companies I've worked for, they were nice enough to send me to some conferences. I learned a ton. Document it. Take the time. Yeah, it's time out of your week. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. But at the same time, it gives you a foundation to say, I did this. And if you're looking for another role, and if it's a role dissimilar to what you're doing today, how can you adapt what you've done to the new industry or the new role or the new vertical? And that's a hard one for people to wrap their brain around. But all this stuff applies. You just got to spin it the right way. My brother actually just wrapped up a career as a music teacher at a high school and became a police officer. That's a pretty big shift.
I'll say so, yeah.
Working with crowds, training and educating, crowd control, formal training for marching band and getting people to work together. There's a lot of stuff that can apply to it. Now pitting people in a car, I don't think there's an equivalent to that, but but there's a lot of overlap. And I know it's different, but if you're going into a brand new vertical, I've got a friend of mine worked at a database monitoring company, built software and tooling around that, and then moved into the financial sector. Okay. Well, what applies? The database technology that you're monitoring is now different, but the methodology and the framework and the foundation for how you did your job with quality assurance, with user acceptance testing, with training and documentation around it, all that still applies. You just change a couple buzzwords in there.
I think Nick posed the typical situation that happens. Somebody loses their job and then they go, oh, I'm in a cold start situation. I've done no disaster recovery planning and I need to run my disaster recovery plan, right? Oh, I maybe should have been going to birds of a feather meeting or, some kind of like networking events, but I haven't done it. So how do I start doing it now?
Or, oh, I should have had a disaster recovery plan.
Yeah, exactly.
That's essentially clear your mind and start thinking. Give me the top 5 things about the current job that you really enjoyed, and then make a beeline and run. So quite literally, if you like infrastructure, look to see who's hiring in your town. Look for those user groups, because it doesn't take more than a meeting or two if you're comfortable around people to actually get to know some of these folks. Meetup is a great place for that kind of stuff. There's the Azure data community. There's all kinds of good technical user groups. There's business user groups in town. Society of Young Professionals and all these other just business-minded people. It doesn't have to be tech-focused. Dig in your heels, get yourself out of your comfort zone, and go to these things and start talking to people. You don't have to be way out of your zone to say, hi, I'm David. I'm a nerd. I like computers. This is what I do. What do you do?
You're right. It's those conversations that maybe we take for granted, just how much we could learn about other people in our industry. And it could be as simple as you've talked to this person, found out about what they do, told them about what you're doing. And you could even say, hey, is there someone you know that you think I should meet based on what I've just said?
Yeah. The worst thing you can do is nothing. Nothing will not move you forward. Even a basic conversation, if nothing else comes from it, you've still talked to somebody. You've still got a connection now.
How many of us have, in the back of our minds, critiqued our employer for their lack of disaster recovery planning or business continuity planning, but in our own careers have also not done disaster recovery planning or business continuity planning, right? So
all of us,
we have to take some accountability for our own careers. That's almost the theme for this podcast, right?
Yeah. Nobody is going to hand you a new career or a job promotion on a silver platter. Somebody's not going to walk up to you on the street and say, I'm going to make you a CIO tomorrow. Here, let's go. Just doesn't happen. And for all of the folks that sit around waiting and they just think that better things are around the corner, the odds are if you don't push, better things are not around the corner. It may not be any worse. It's probably not going to be any better. Career paths in IT with a company that's willing to invest in you are rare these days. They want you to do a job, and that's what you're there to do. There's not a track for promotion or advancement. So the convention in the US is to quit your job and find a better one to get that promotion. I hate to say it. I'd love to have career paths, but it just doesn't really exist all over the place. So it's on you. What are you doing? For me, it was going independent for myself. That was arguably one of the better things I've ever done in life. It gave me the ability to say, I like this new technology. I think it has business value. I'm going to learn it. And I'm going to learn it to the point that I can tell other people how to use it. And it's fun. And if the world shifts, you can shift with it faster than a normal career. But that doesn't mean you can't pivot a regular career. I've gone from an infrastructure admin to a software developer to a database administrator to a consultant to what I do now, which is basically the nerd of all trades. You can pivot, and it all just builds. And that list of accomplishments, that prep that you've done to build the foundation to make essentially disaster recovery for your career easier, Failing over a database to a different site that's already been replicated is a right-click go kind of operation. If you've pigeonholed 20 years of your life on a system that is totally proprietary and non-transferable, what are you going to do? I say that from experience. A good friend of mine at one of my first jobs out of college, he had spent 25 years at this company on proprietary systems. And then one day, they just told him to disappear. It took him 7 months to figure out what to do after that for a job at less than half the pay. And he is still not happy. It's difficult. He knew it was a proprietary system, but he got complacent. He thought the company would just retain him no matter what. The DR prep wasn't there. I'm not saying he's a bad person at all. I'm not saying anything negative. The prep wasn't there. It drives me nuts because the prep needed to be there.
Do you think even those of us who feel like we need a DR plan for our career, and maybe even feel like we have some form of that, documented or undocumented, do you think there are still elements that we need in there that we're not thinking about?
Guaranteed.
What are some of those?
The unknown unknowns.
It's the unknown unknowns. Quite literally, if you take your company's IT systems right now and fail it over to DR, I promise you, there's something that's not going to work. There's something somebody missed. There's some undocumented change that's going to wreck a bunch of stuff. There's some new feature that a firmware version is out of date at DR and that feature isn't there, and just something like that. So no DR strategy is perfect unless you test it. And who wants to test a career DR strategy? That's bad. That's a bad day when you have to test it. Now, a high availability solution, that's a little bit different. A DR solution, that's horrible. You don't want to have to do that unless your life really depended on it.
Well, it's tough to fail over and fail back, too.
That's exactly it. Yeah, because the failback is never the same at that point. But yeah, there's always going to be something. But it goes back to, can you troubleshoot? Can you identify the things that are missing now that you've failed over and what isn't working? And go through the feedback loop. And can you improve and clean up and fix and arguably don't make it equal to where you came from. Make it better. Because then the bar has now risen. And it's just an uphill climb after that. There's no downhill slide.
I mean, I guess the only way I can think of to test your career DR plan would be to follow whatever documented plan you have to see how fast you could get an interview and get at least to the finals.
Yeah. If you have a job right now and you're content, you may not be happy, but you may not be looking to leave. Go look for another job. See how far you get. If they make you an offer, I think that's a pretty good DR plan if the job is something you want. If you start doing this and all of a sudden you realize, I can't make it past sending in a resume, it's an eye-opener, and now you've got a safety net. You've got that shock absorber. You don't have to leave your current job. You can start to look at the mirror. What am I not doing that's making me less marketable to these folks? And that's a hard pill to swallow, but you have nothing to lose, really. If you're not intent on leaving your current job, there's really no harm in it unless your current job finds out that you're looking and then they do something bad.
And hopefully you're not doing it just to waste someone else's time. Like if I'm going to go and interview for a job, I'm at least taking the potential job offer seriously. Or I would hope people would, and not spend up a bunch of time wasters. Because if you did go through that and you worked with a recruiter and you worked with a hiring manager and you really liked everything and you didn't take the job, one would hope that you could still maintain a good relationship with those folks and you had legitimate certain reasons why you said no.
Yeah.
Not just, I wanted to see if I could.
Yeah. If your mind is where you're looking, you should take an opportunity if it comes your way, if it's a good opportunity, if it's one that is clearly going to better your position in life. Why not? What do you have to lose? It looks like it's a better situation.
People think about that as being the problem. And I don't think that is the problem for 95% of the people. There's a certain number of hoops that you have to jump through to get a job. Have you even written a resume recently? Have you written a cover letter if you think that that's necessary? Have you submitted a job application and gotten a recruiter to call you back is the second level there. And have you been able to get past that kind of recruiter screen to get to talk to whatever the next level is? Usually it's, maybe the hiring manager does a screen before, they really kick off into some serious investigation of you. Have you gotten past that hurdle? If you've gotten all the way, maybe there's like some kind of presentation that you have to do, or you have to talk to the hiring manager's director, or second line manager, and you have to get an approval from a VP. That's like 7 hurdles. And if you are consistently getting to hurdle 5, then maybe you don't need to worry.
Yeah.
And you're testing yourself over and over again. Can I get to hurdle 5? Can I get to hurdle 6? Eventually it comes down to the position, it emerges over time, is not going to be enough of a raise for me to leave. And at that point, I gracefully bow out. If that's where you're getting, like, that's fine. But the vast majority of people don't even start because they think about that last hurdle. Oh, what if they offer me something and then I need to make a decision about whether to leave or not? Well, that's not the situation that you're facing yet.
Agreed. And I got to say, it's one thing I really like about consulting because, no joke, I interview for my job 5 to 10 times a week. Our average project is only 40 to 60 hours. It's short. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of pre-sales discussions that I have with folks. And I've gotten pretty comfortable with it. And it's as much of an interview of them as it is them interviewing you. And it takes some experience. So start the process, because if you are just jittery, nervous, can't speak a sentence to these folks, how are you going to make it to that next level? How are you going to get to the point where they're extending you an offer? It's hard. It takes time. It takes experience. It takes a feedback loop of improvement in yourself to understand how to approach those things. And I'm not saying just, interview to waste somebody's time, but if you are seriously looking, interview for things that may be tangential to what you're interested in the hopes that they may actually be a better fit or better path, any of that stuff. Because the more experience you have with it, the better. Got a job as a DBA because I had some SQL Server experience and knew a lot of infrastructure. And then day 2, hey, you're the DBA now. Okay. And then ran with it and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And that not taking that first step is the mistake that everybody's making. If you're a business, you don't say, well, I don't want to investigate disaster recovery because what if the disaster recovery target is better than our existing infrastructure? Then we have a decision to make, and I don't want to have to face that decision. So I'm not going to invest in disaster. Like that's the most ridiculous statement that, a business could make. But people are making that
I've heard
statement about their career disaster recovery every day.
If the poop hits the fan, what would you do today? What would you do tomorrow? What would you do next week? What professional network have you built up? What proof do you have in the industry of what you've actually accomplished? Who can you call to vouch for you? Because they always ask for references. What can you do? What can you reference? What can't you reference? What can you make veiled allusions to? I think I can name like one of my customers by name publicly, and the 900 others I can't. But I can say, I did this for this industry, this and that. Those are the kind of things that I hate the phrase brand awareness, because I sound like a YouTube influencer or something like that. But to have visibility and verifiable proof that you've actually done something, that's powerful. You need to have that. And it goes back to the prep. Push the fear aside. That's the hardest part. A lot of folks are afraid of the end result. A lot of folks are afraid of the process. A lot of folks are afraid of the act of change because it puts you out of your comfort zone.
Well, I think all of those fears for most people are a stand-in for facing the fear that losing their position is a possibility.
Yeah.
Losing your current position is a possibility. There's just no way around that.
Nobody is indispensable.
Yeah. But if I face that and I say that it's non-zero, then maybe that involves me having crippling indecision to do anything. So instead, I'll just not think about that at all, which is, again, the worst thing that you can do for disaster recovery.
I'll give you an example of this. At that SQL Server user group back in 2008, at the time, I didn't like getting up in front of people. I would help coordinate things, do this. I was always the guy in the back. The folks that I worked with at the user group knew the kind of stuff that I did day in and day out. I didn't think there was anything too special with it. It's just, why aren't other people doing this? I don't know, but it's not that hard. It's fun. So 2010 comes along, and we decide in Omaha to hold a SQL Saturday event. And it's basically a bunch of IT professionals meeting for 8 to 5 on a Saturday outside of business hours to talk geek stuff, give presentations, have a lot of fun. Speaker backed out the last minute. The lead of the user group said, David, you will speak on SQL Server virtualization here. Okay. Did an hour presentation. No problem. Had fun. Enjoyed it. There's a guy sitting in the back of the room. Prim, proper, dressed well-tailored beard. Nice guy. Had no idea who he was. I'm going to name him by name on this. He was the guy that wrote the O'Reilly book, SQL in a Nutshell, that I had 4 copies on my shelf at home. Had no idea who he was. 6 months later, I get an email randomly out of the blue because I'd put my email address on the last slide of that presentation. Hi, I'm Kevin Klein. I was in your presentation in SQL Saturday Omaha. I need to give a presentation on this topic at the equivalent of your Super Bowl. Would you like to present with me? Gee, let me think. Of course. November of 2011, I get my first big technical presentation at this conference. I figured there'd be 30, 40 people in the room. No. They closed the doors 30 minutes before the presentation because they hit the 500-person fire marshal limit. And we give an hour-and-a-half presentation in front of a packed room. And it turns out his role in the presentation was to be comic relief between sections, and he wanted me to give 95% of the presentation. That was right there what let me get into consulting for myself.
Career inflection point.
That was a career inflection point from an individual that, kudos to him, Kevin Klein, if you're out there, you're awesome. But that was the thing that showed that this thing that I learned how to do on my own is something that not everybody could do. And it gave me the confidence to be able to run with it, both from a tech presentation perspective and a career perspective, and literally make it work.
That's awesome.
It is actually emotional. Literally, you walk into a conference room and you expect 20, 30 people. No, I'm in the big room and you look left and right and all you see are chairs. That was amazing.
You wouldn't want to have to nail that presentation as part of your DR plan.
No.
But that's an incredible accomplishment.
It was a topic that I knew. It was the unknown knowns. And from telling people about it, I had the experience of being able to share it in a way that they can understand, even though the topic was foreign to them back then. And it worked. It clicked. I would say that was the career disaster recovery failover to a better infrastructure. Things just skyrocketed after that. I spoke at 118 SQL Saturdays after that. It set the awareness in the community of what I could do, so that in 2013, when I went independent as a consultant, I had a very friendly but very strong non-compete. I couldn't talk to anybody that I'd worked with. We got our first customer day 3, all from somebody seeing me at a SQL Saturday event talking about this topic. And that is so cool. So unbelievably cool. It's everything that accidentally came together in the whole career DR, except I would say this was a proactive career failover for disaster preparedness, and we've been in business now for 11 and a half years doing this stuff, and we're still having fun playing with big toys every day. But I look at tomorrow, where do I need to add stuff to the career? Where do I need to add more awareness to any of this stuff? Where do I need to be so that if the world shifts in a year, I'm ready? Every day, you look at the mirror. You have to, because if you don't, you're going to be caught off guard. It's the last spot you want to be in, both for you and your family.
David, that's amazing. Feels like a mic drop moment there.
I've still got the photo. The guy on the stage, I didn't know he did it because I was giving a demo to people. He walked up behind me and got a photo behind my shoulder looking out at the audience. And it's like, I still have that photo to this day. Just amazing.
It just goes to show you, like, if you work incredibly hard, get depth of knowledge on a really important domain subject, become like a deep, deep expert, get out there, share your knowledge, learn in public. Hey, you just might get lucky.
And luck's got a lot to do with it.
Yeah, but the harder you work, the luckier you get, right?
Yeah.
You put yourself in a position to be lucky.
Yeah, there were 3 SQL Saturdays that day. He picked our event and my session. That's luck. But just luck of the draw, but the work. That one presentation in 2011 was 12 years in the works. I put SQL Server on VMware Workstation in November of 99. And in 2011, I'd virtualized literally everything I could get my hands on successfully before the world was doing it. That's what set that up.
You became an overnight success 12 years later.
Wait, I look at it this way. After the last 5 years, we're still in business. We're still living comfortably. We're still solving big problems out there. And I don't have to market. The work comes to us because of that brand awareness for so long. I'm very thankful for that.
The accomplishments are documented.
They're documented in the public eye, and I can reference them.
Well, we want to make sure that we document how people can follow up with you on this conversation, David.
Absolutely. If you are interested, check out my home site. I actually just updated a bunch of stuff. So I pulled my blog because nobody was hitting it because it's all nerd stuff. If you go to davidklee.net or heraflux.com, my consultancy, no marketing there, feel free, reach out. If you hit me on LinkedIn or just quite literally hit either of those landing spots and you'll be able to find me. Let me know what I can do to help. Again, not a marketing thing. I'm a geek. I want to help you solve problems. This is what I do. And it's a lot of fun.
And if people just want to have a conversation, David's a great guy to talk to, for sure.
Yeah, if you want to just say hi, let me know. I'm happy to drop what I'm doing because troubleshooting after a while, you kind of turn into a zombie at the end of the day. Always good to learn, learn about new folks and just geek out for a while. If anybody wants a home lab, let me know. I can show you how to build one. We'll geek out for that for a while.
Thanks again for coming back and proposing this topic, David. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's been a lot of fun. Can't wait for the next one.
Likewise.
Thanks again, David.
Can you see that loop of personal troubleshooting and documentation now? After listening back to this discussion again, I immediately thought of episode 284 with Jason Belk. And we didn't use the term in this discussion with David, but what we're really talking about in doing all this documentation is drafting a career narrative that we can speak to in the interview process. And guess what? The first prerequisite to all that is documentation. We have to make the time to do it. As hard as that is, nobody's going to say, hey, block your calendar to document your accomplishments. We have to do it. And what we're trying to do is help all of us avoid that cold start situation where we've lost a job or really need to get a new job and we haven't done any of the prep work. There were so many good questions David highlighted that we could be asking ourselves as we think through what we should document and in what level of detail. And the level of detail is as much as you can put down. David also talks about how we are documenting repeatable processes. But the interesting thing to me is that the documentation process itself is a repeatable process that can be used not only in your technical work to solve problems, but in the work of documenting your accomplishments so that you have that career disaster recovery plan. So I hope you'll consider, after listening to this discussion, whether your documentation of your technical accomplishments and the business accomplishments exist, and whether they're at the level of detail that actually translates well into updating your resume, updating LinkedIn, and sharing those stories in interview discussions, in promotion discussions. If someone asks you about your accomplishments at a networking event, you could share them in that way, with humility, of course. So make sure you look in the mirror. And don't forget to look out the window and find that community group or groups that can help you learn, that can help you understand what's happening in our industry, and might give you some ideas for things you want to learn or do next. I want to say a special thanks to David for reaching out to us and suggesting these topics working with us, collaborating on the outline as we talked through the discussion. I really enjoyed it. If you have a topic you'd like for us to address on the show, send us an email, nerdjourneypodcast@gmail.com, or hit us up on LinkedIn. I'd love to talk to you about it and collaborate on an outline for a great show. Take care.
Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at VJourneyman, for Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.